Howdy there, folks. This is Father Dougal 9000 here, and welcome to another episode of Game Finish Trios, a series where I talk about the games I've played and beaten as part of the Game Finish Challenge off of the Hardcore Gaming 101 forum. It's the height of summer, and you know what that means. Time to solve some hard-boiled mysteries in a big, stuffy trench coat, and taking on all sorts of weird aliens as a spandex-clad troupe of actors. For what is summer but that time of year where you spend most of it feeling clammy and overdressed? Today's games were originally logged from the 17th to the 25th of May, 2022. Jake Hunter Detective Story, Ghosts of the Dusk, Episode 1, Legend of the Demon Princess, for the Nintendo 3DS. Yup, I'm back with more Jake Hunter stuff already. Ghosts of the Dusk was the last of the mobile phone compilation games released, containing games 21 to 24, along with a new adventure, and it was the only other compilation game to get localized outside of Japan. Like before, I'll be treating each game as a separate entry and writing about them whenever I beat them. This episode, or the mobile game number 21, has Jake investigating a case of possible infidelity, one that seems to involve his assistant, Yulia. As he looks into it, he also gets roped by a colleague into discovering the truth behind an accident on a film set 6 years ago. The more progress Jake makes, the more it looks like these two cases could be connected. There's a higher degree of visual and audio fidelity compared to the DS game, but what you actually do is pretty much the same. Go to places and talk to people. I did like how the office and outside street look basically the same, but in more detail. It actually felt like coming home, believe it or not. Something I was unexpectedly amused and pleased by was the text font for the dialogue. It has this elongated look that reminds me of the font used in the original Shenmue games, but it's also pixelated. I'm used to 3DS games featuring much smoother lettering, so it was kind of a treat to have such old school looking text. The one thing I wasn't keen on is how sloppy the translation is. It's quite legible, and there's a keen sense of wording that hits on the hard-boiled detective thing pretty well, but there's also a notable amount of punctuation errors or misspellings, repeated words like when you see and twice, and even one case where a character's name is written incorrectly during a pivotal scene. I can't really speak to how the localization process went, but it feels like there wasn't enough time for it to be polished up before release, and that's a shame, honestly. This does share a similar pattern with the last two episodes of Memories of the Past, which were made entirely by WorkJam and not based on older games, in that it's quite linear. There's one or two moments where you have a choice of location, but you're otherwise led along to the next part of the mystery. I only got stuck at one moment in which you have to investigate specific parts of the screen along the lines of Ace Attorney. That's a new mechanic. And that's because the save icon was obscuring the area I specifically had to see before I could move on. That's a very weird example of an obtrusive UI. The length of the game, which is 2.5 hours compared to the hour and a half it would normally take to beat these Jake Hunter mobile adventures, can be attributed to the fact that it's just quite long, with you solving two cases at the same time, rather than any tricky investigations or whatnot. If that is the way these games were done under WorkJam, more linear adventures, I'm not sure how to feel about that. I still enjoy these characters and the mysteries, but I did enjoy the investigative side of things from the earlier games in Memories of the Past, the Famicom remakes. And I was hoping to see more of that. Ah well. Jake Hunter Detective Story, Ghosts of the Dusk, Episode 2, For Love, for the Nintendo 3DS. the second mobile game featured in Ghosts of the Dusk, the 22nd Saburo Jinguji mobile phone game overall. This sees Jake investigating a group of land sharks harassing a divorced mother and son for their property. As he further looks into the situation, he also learns about the past of the mother and her surprisingly mature son, a past that eventually rears its head. I've been reading up on the Jake Hunter series through the Holing no Jikenbo blog. It's a cool blog by Holing Wong, who has translated various Japanese detective novels, and is a blog talking about Japanese detective fiction in general. They've covered several of the unlocalized Jake Hunter games, and even a handful of novels made back in the mid-2000s. And something they discuss is how Hunter features plenty of social commentary in its stories. Considering this game discusses the rise of land sharking despite the country being deep in a recession, that's very much the case here, and it results in a fairly unique little story. It's also unique for how quietly it resolves. There's a couple of fistfights you have with the land shark's goons, but there isn't a big dramatic conclusion in the way that there normally is for these games. Things just get sorted out, followed by a small coda that left me feeling deliberately hollow. This was the first time I really found myself feeling strongly against one of the characters, but in a way that the game explains is understandable. Aside from the land sharks, there's nobody truly in the wrong or right, and it encourages a sense of empathy that I maybe needed reminding of. Chroma Squad for the Nintendo Switch. Chroma Squad is a game I've been wanting to play for years, mainly because it was announced on Kickstarter a little after my year-long obsession with Super Sentai and Power Rangers had faded away. A game where you could act out tokusatsu plots that might come with a mode to create your own plots and whatnot. That sounded like the coolest thing to me, but I didn't have the means or internet speed to play it for ages. It's only recently that I remembered it existed and decided to finally give it a go. It's a pretty decent turn-based strategy RPG where you play as a group of stuntmen making their own Sentai show, with your actions in the show resulting in more fans and cash that you can use to upgrade your studio, buy better equipment, craft items, and employ ad agencies that can add certain boosts to what you earn at the end of each stage. Most of the stages are fairly short, taking about 10-15 minutes to beat, which makes her a mostly excellent game to play on the go. Mostly. You can't save during stages, that's unfortunate, and this becomes very annoying for the first and last episodes of each season as they take around 30 minutes. I also wish the enemy turns had a fast forward button like the cutscenes, because sitting through half a dozen or more enemies just moving around, it gets quite tiresome after a while. I'm not really sure how to put this last bit, but the game feels oddly lacking beyond its premise and neat gameplay. There's plenty of depth to the different abilities you can acquire, the dialogue is fairly cute, and I like how the plot blurs the lines between fiction and reality, in a way not too unlike Attack of the Friday Monsters on the 3DS, but nothing about it makes me want to return to the game. Even though there's a New Game Plus mode and at least 3 extra routes that unlock new stages and characters, those routes seem to be mostly consigned to the 5th and final chapter of the game, so I don't really fancy going through the rest of the game just to get to this point and see those new things. But I appreciate that they're there, and I'm chuffed to say I have finally beaten a turn-based strategy RPG with Chroma Squad. Yes, seriously, never beaten one before, so it's really nice to have that feather in the cap now. Heck yeah. And with that, we've wrapped up another episode of the series. I hope that you enjoyed watching, and that you'll tune in for the next video. Thank you so much, and until we meet again, have a wonderful day.